Renee Balcom is an expert in guiding clients and their families through the healthcare system. She has over a decade of direct patient advocacy and work in consulting under her belt. You see, Renee also comes to the healthcare industry from a background of being a CEO of tech companies, coming up through Silicon Valley in the early days, and being able to then take that know-how, take that decision-making, and be able to share those gifts and skills with her clients and their families. You are going to enjoy learning more about Renee, learning more about if having somebody working with you as a patient advocate is something that you need to incorporate into your planning for senior care, whether it's for you or for a loved one. You're sure to learn a lot from this conversation, and I hope you take it to heart. So once you've listened to this conversation, be sure to share it with some friends and family that would enjoy the wisdom that Renee is sharing with us on this conversation. Hello, and welcome to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. This is your host, Greg Payne, coming at you from Studio 12. This podcast is about being the best possible grandpa you can be, focusing on what it is to be a grandpa and how we can all share that experience together for our grandchildren. Before we get started, I wanted to remind you of my course that's over on grandparentsacademy.com. Now, this course is in 4 parts where we go into the history of grandfathers. We talk about the possibilities that we have if we embrace this role, how we can do some different things to build connections with our grandchildren, as well as learning more about some of the challenges that the youth are facing today. So please go to the affiliate link on my website and click over to Grandparents Academy and be sure to sign up for this fall course. I'd love to see you there, and I'd love to have your feedback about the course. Now, I'm anxious to share with you this conversation that I've had with Renee Balcom. You're going to learn a lot about patient advocacy and how that can work and be a support system for you and your loved ones. So, without further ado, let's jump into this conversation. Hi, Renee. Welcome to the Cool Grandpa Podcast.
Thank you, Greg. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me today.
I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to sit down with us and talk to us about being a healthcare advocate and elder care and some of the different things that go into even the decision making that we have to do sometimes as adult children with our parents, maybe our aunts and uncles, maybe a grandparent, but all of this that comes up that we need to be thinking about before it gets into a crisis.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Now, as we get started, could you tell us a little bit about your background and introduce us to how you started your company and got into healthcare advocacy?
As with many of us, right, we kind of follow the ebbs and flows of life. And, I think statistically they say less than 60% of people who study a certain coursework in college actually do that work. And I actually was a CEO, started out in the technology industry in Silicon Valley in the late 70s. So that'll give you a little bit of a hint of my age. One of the very first females actually in the tech industry. And within 10 years, I was a CEO in technology. And then life started happening. We were seeing technology leave the country and start to go offshore. And I started spending a little bit of time in China. And, at that point, I had kids. They were 7 and 8 years old. And my moral compass was just spinning about how much time I was gone and kind of seeing, our technology being sent into a communist government. And it just wasn't sitting well with me. So I decided it was time for a change. And I wanted to bring my kids out of Silicon Valley. I'm originally from the Midwest. So I wanted them to have kind of that small town, sense of freedom and Midwestern, we can ride our bike all over kind of idea and attitude, right? So we found a business in Southwest Oregon called it's in a community called Brookings Harbor, Oregon. And it's the very first community on the coast, on the coastal highway, 101, as you leave California and enter Oregon. And if you're not familiar with that place, it's just spectacular. It's like diamonds shining in all around you, the ocean, the rivers. There's lots of microclimates, very, very beautiful. And I bought a little business there, cashed out of Silicon Valley, and moved my family and my tribe. I call it the whole tribe because aunt and uncle and my mom and, the whole group of us moved up there. And we landed there, Greg, the Friday before 9/11. And then that Tuesday, 9/11 happened. And I got to my new office that Thursday after I kind of got my family settled in a little bit, and only to discover that it was a shell company and the whole thing was a fraud. And I spent $5.5 million of hard, cold cash on that shell company. So, lots of things occurred at that time. I could have gone back to Silicon Valley. I could stay focused and take what I had, whatever was left of this company, and tried to build it, use it and build out another company. And that's what I chose to do, was stay in Brookings, Oregon, and stay committed to this life change with my family and really start working through building a new business. Unfortunately, though, then the dot-com bubble burst, and then the mortgage companies started bouncing all over the place. And I had leveraged myself pretty aggressively in trying to get this company off the ground, right? So I found myself needing a job, and ended up I lost my marriage through the process, but which was really probably the greatest catastrophe of the whole thing. However, I just, put my nose down and started working, and I found my way into the adult care industry. And in that industry, I tend to look at everything through the lens of a CEO. It's just how I look at things. It drives my husband crazy because we'll go to dinner and I'll look around the restaurant and it's like, this restaurant's losing money. There's too many people here. There's not enough. And he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I can just kind of run a real quick P&L right now. And he's just like, who does that? Like, who actually sits and analyzes businesses when you're just have a plate of spaghetti, right?
Yep.
But that's just my nature. It's just, who I am. It's what I love. And so I'm in the adult care industry, and I'm starting to realize how siloed medicine is and how layered it is and difficult it is for people to actually access good care. And again, course of life events, right? I ended up having this little man called me up, and he had heard me speak publicly, and he wanted to know if I would go to the doctor with him because he didn't feel like he was being heard by his doctor. And he was 87 years old and lived independently, and, just felt like someone else going with him could be helpful. So I'm like, and he's like, and I'll pay you. I'm going to pay you to do it. I'm like, okay. So I meet with him. We go to the doctor. We get everything worked out. And then the next thing you know, the doctor's office is calling me saying, hey, we have another patient that we think could use your help. And I kid you not, Greg, the next thing you know, I'm in this business. I'm managing a calendar of clients, and I'm like, what is this? What is this thing called? Right. So I started researching it, and I found, healthcare advocacy, and at the time, and it's still just a new profession, to be honest with you. It's still really, really new, but in no time, inside of 5 years, I had 39 employees working in 5 counties in Southwest Oregon. I was a founding director for the public health and mental health department there. About, 5 years in, 6 years in, Governor Kitzhaber, he was the governor of Oregon at the time, reached out and asked me to write the scope of work for a certification program for University of Oregon for healthcare advocacy. And I led that team and, just found myself in this whole different business. It's been an amazing business. It's a business that is very, very, very rewarding. We help lots of people. Our youngest client today is 11 and our oldest one is 94. And, we just, and again, healthcare, it's not getting easier. It's getting harder. It's not getting more accessible. It's getting more complex. So I anticipate we're going to continue to see growth in our industry. And it's very, very rewarding and satisfying business.
Oh, I bet, because I think one of the things that we need, and my wife and I were just at the emergency room the other night, and everything's great, but we needed to go in. was seeing how many people there didn't work for the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
There were all these subcontractors, and they were
Mm-hmm.
all, and you could tell because they all had different little company name tags and they all had different things on them. And to your point, I feel like it used to be you'd go in and work with a hospital, or you would go in and work with a doctor's office. But now you've got the subcontractor that does the tests, the subcontractor that comes in and does the anesthesia, the subcontractors that come in and do these things. And to your point, it becomes more complex, when we're sometimes dealing with very emotional issues around care, quality of life. Sometimes we got to have that person that can sit there and listen to the analytical side of things and listen to like, hey, choice A is going to cost you this, but here's the benefits. Because as a patient, I can just put myself in those, you're scared, you're nervous. This doesn't happen to you all the time. I mean, the doctor, you're patient number 20 today for the doctor.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So this is great. And I definitely think that, having these advocates come in and help is something that's needed and will continue to grow. And leads me into, how do we define even elder care, and how, is that just an age bracket similar to you turn 50, here's your AARP card, and, suddenly you're elderly? Or is it a series of, I don't know, ability tests, cognitive tests, things along those lines?
Well, let me first address some of the things that you were talking about with regard to the emergency room, right? There really is this thing called white coat syndrome. And frankly, we all have it. It falls into the fight or flight, mode. And what happens if we're sitting in an environment that we feel a little bit threatened by, even if it's got hearts and hands and we are told that they're there to care for us. The fact is, our human nature is to get really, really myopic, and we will not take in the information that's being given to us. And it doesn't matter. It's a very, very unusual person that can sit in a crisis situation in a hospital or any kind of clinical setting and be able to take all the information in, because your mind really starts going in a lot of different directions. And again, it's the whole fight or flight. Your adrenaline starts going up, and you have a physiological response to what's going on around you. So it's really, really important to have another set of ears and another set of eyes in those rooms, right? With regard to elders, it makes me laugh because elderly, older, they're trying to find gentler words for elders, right? But the truth is, it's pretty subjective when you think about it, right? I mean, I've met, some 25-year-olds that might be considered old in how they conduct themselves and their day-to-day, ADLs, right? And then I've met some pretty spry, and frankly, I've been able to serve some pretty spry 97-year-olds that, could whip me into shape pretty quickly. So, and kind of everything in between. But the United States government, under the Social Security Act, deems elders at 65. So that's kind of the official elder state. Now we're living longer, we're living healthier, and I just don't really think that you can define an elder before they're in their 70s, to be honest with you. I think, for the most part, and maybe I'm biased because I'm 65 and I refuse to be an elder yet. I'm too immature to be an elder. So, so I won't wear that moniker yet, but I also work with people that are elders. And when I think of elders, I think of maturity and wisdom and, grace that they bring to the conversation. I don't think of people that are elderly in the fashion of Western medicine where, they're kind of old folks that need a help up, right? From a cognitive point of view, we start seeing aging, probably in our mid to late 60s. We start seeing what can be called the aging brain. But again, we're learning so much about the brain now that they've untangled DNA. There's so much new information, and there are lots and lots of ways to keep the brain young and youthful throughout the rest of our lives. So elder is an interesting word. And, we'll see where it goes over time. But again, I just think it's a subjective word and should be used with reverence, in my opinion.
Sure. No, and that makes sense. I think we all want to, there's the need to have both a very clear definition, almost like when you turn 21, then you can do these things. But then there's also the aging and coming into something where people may have had, I don't know, a stroke or some kind of health thing that then puts them on par with somebody that's 20, 25 years their senior. And
Right.
So one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is how well has the marketplace in general, hospitals, nursing homes, rehab facilities, even senior living areas, how well have they anticipated really the aging population? Because I remember even back in the 80s hearing about, hey, there's this whole market that's going to be needed for physical therapists. There's going to be needed for orthopedic surgeons. In your opinion, have we done a good job anticipating a rising older generation?
That's a great question. My reflex answer is no, because I always start with the medical providers. And we're currently seeing, and I do a lot of public speaking about the business of care. And one of the messages I'd love for your audience to understand is care and the care spectrum, the whole care continuum is a business. And it's run like a business. And most of us were brought up with the hearts and hands and, the sweet television shows about the doctor who, knows our parents or knew our grandpa and they're there to care for us. Well, that world doesn't exist anymore. Not in westernized medicine. In Western medicine, you're going to find treatment facilities and they're really there to treat whatever you tell them is your problem. If you don't know what your problem is, you might fall into a battery of tests, depending on whether or not your insurance company will authorize them. But at the end of the day, they may never really be able to solve your problem, but they may have some kind of treatment through, pharmaceutical drugs or therapies that they can actually treat your symptoms. And most of us, if we're being honest to ourselves, that's what we're finding in the medical environment today. The other thing that's happening in medicine today is we're seeing a huge amount of doctors retiring out and less doctors coming in. So medical school is very expensive in the United States. It's very time consuming and lengthy, and it's not affordable for a lot of people. So we're not seeing as many people enter into medical school. And there's a huge, huge group of doctors that are getting ready to retire out. Medicare, which, with the aging population, Medicare is taking on a bigger role in the benefits, continuum, right? And Medicare is already talking about reducing reimbursements to doctors that are already strapped for reimbursement. So that's starting to happen. We're starting to see that now. I had a orthopedic surgeon's office, a whole group of orthos stopped taking Medicare because they said the reimbursements won't cover their operating room fees. So they're actually literally setting up their clients on a payment plan to pay their medical LLC, this ortho LLC, to make payments to them because it's and pay interest because it's easier for them to run a bank than for them to get reimbursements through Medicare. And I don't believe that will be the last time we hear about that. I think more and more specialists are going to take on that same point of view because they need to do their work, but they also need to make money at it, right? And so, and hospitals and these facilities just aren't paying, the way they should or they could. So, anyway, so with regard to housing, there seems to be there's a lot of private companies that are building huge, assisted living facilities and memory care facilities and these very grand environments for all of us to age. But I will tell you, and my prediction is I'm not moving in there, right? There's a whole group of us that will never live in an environment like that. And there's a whole group of us that don't need to live in an environment like that. We're going to age better in place. I think the United States government's going to step in and offer some services for the aging population to be able to age in place. We're already starting to see that happen coming out of COVID. We know people were safer in their homes than they were in skilled care or assisted living during the pandemic. And, it allows families to step in. But once you move into community living, it's very, very expensive, and it's not the same. It's not a good level of care. With that said, though, I think that assisted living is for some people. It's just not for most of us. I mean, I think there are some people that just love it and they thrive there and they're happy there. But when I look at the volume, I live in Sacramento, California. We have over 500 assisted living facilities in this community. And, they're constantly marketing to get people in those places and they're expensive. They run between $6,000 and $12,000 a month. That's the other thing. Most of us don't have the resources for that. And so I think we're going to do it differently. I predict we're going to do it differently.
I agree with that because, to your point, as I'm working and talking with other people, that price tag of a nice retirement community of that $6,000 to $12,000, whatever savings you had, even if you sell the house and everything else, you're going to burn through that pretty quickly in most cases. And and to your point, a lot of us are going to be better off finding that single level ranch home and living modestly but enjoying the little garden we have out back or whatever. Right. And these places have gardens and all that, but at the same time, there's a control thing as well, and an exposure to large epidemics that you can better control.
So again, my hot button is the business of care. So when you look at the business model of assisted living, every time you decline, they make more money, right? So they literally have written right into their P&L an objective for you to decline there. Because if they need to push, and I've seen this with my own eyes. I had a client move into an assisted living facility. She was driving her own car. She had lived alone. And what motivated her to want to go to assisted living was she just didn't want to deal with groceries in the yard and all of that anymore. And she'd had a little fall in her backyard and it kind of scared her. And again, there's lots of scare tactics going on from scare tactic marketing from these places. So she was convinced to move into assisted living. Well, they moved her on the 4th floor all the way at the very back, right? And in no time, I kid you not, Greg, in no time, I go to visit her, and I swear to you, it had to be in the first 30 days. They're pushing her down the hallway in a wheelchair. And I'm like, oh, why are we in a wheelchair? Well, it's just easier. Well, easier for who? Well, it takes a long time for her to get down the hall. And I said, well, who placed her up in this hallway up here anyway? She was in her 80s, right? But then they started charging her for everything they were helping her with. And they by design started diminishing her, because clearly the less movement that you have, the more you're going to physically diminish, especially at a certain age, at any age, right? And the next thing you know, she went in there paying, $4,000 a month. And literally inside the first year, she was up to like $8,500 a month.
Wow.
Because of the additional care. So it's just not the panacea that's presented to people. And again, if you understand and you look clearly at the business model, their objective is to work with you and decline. That's how they make money.
Yeah. Well, and now that you say it, it's like, oh, that totally makes sense. Because once I can get somebody that's too tired to walk to the 4th floor all the way back there, now I can, I don't know, have the people say there's mobility issues.
Right.
And then there's going to be strength issues. And then there's going to be, oh, well, now we've got to move them into a different place because they can't get in and out of a shower. Right. And, now that you're saying it, it's like I have kind of a no duh moment happening to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And and most of us don't look at that industry through that lens. I do a newsletter called See Differently. And the whole idea behind See Differently is I want to open people's eyes to what's not being said and what's not obvious in the care industry. Because, listen, we're sick and tired, and sometimes we're just sick and tired as family members that are caring for someone, right? We're looking for a way to help our loved one because we're exhausted. And so we think we're doing the right thing, and we buy into everything that we're being told. And the next thing you know, grandma went from 60 grand a year to, 300 a year. And they reverse mortgaged her house. And, it gets very sad. And I have to tell you, anyone that works with a family member inside of a care facility, you need to be on top of it every day. You need to pay close attention to what's going on with your loved ones, because I promise you, the business model works to make money by diminishing your loved one. Mm. And I've seen it over and over and over.
Yeah. And that's great advice. And like you said, I would be thinking that, hey, here's the great facility. Mom's happy here. They've got activities. They've got all this stuff. And then not paying attention to the business side of it until you have the bills come due. And then you're like scrambling around about how are we going to pay for this?
Yeah. Yeah. I just had a client, her son, she's from England, and her family lives in England, and she married an American. And so that's how she ended up here. She's 84 years old. She's an amazing, amazing person. And she lives in a facility, and I kid you not, her monthly outlay went from $6,800 to just under $11,000 in 1 month.
Holy cow.
That's how high, how they increased. And now, in California, we have what's called Title 22, and we ended up, and the son didn't even know. He didn't even get notification because the corporation was remiss in giving him a heads up. He just saw this big amount of money come out of his mother's account. And so we did end up going back in, and through Title 22, we were able to get those monies back. But she still has to live there. Now at this, $11,000 a month, this place isn't sustainable for her long term. She doesn't have the resources to pay that, for 3 or 4 or 5 years, at that rate. So, so it's again, these contracts are very lengthy. They're very detailed. And most people, I have never, ever, 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 I've been doing this for over 15 years. I have never seen anyone say, oh, let me have my attorney look at this contract. Never. I tell people, have your accountant and your attorney look this over. It's one of the most significant documents you're ever going to sign. So again, for your listeners, you're going into a legal agreement that's very costly, and make certain that, and it's also very negotiable, by the way. Just like I said, there's a lot of open beds. So use your negotiation power. We don't do that enough. We don't do it well enough to go in, because it's intimidating. You've got this big document. You just want to do what's best for mom or grandma. And they're telling the food's great. They're going to love it here, only to discover, I don't know if you knew what happened during the pandemic, but all of these people were left in their rooms, literally eating off of styrofoam with plastic forks for months and months and months at a time, isolated, alone, taking their meals alone. And they never got a single penny of discount for their care. Not a single penny. They still paid top dollar to eat cold food served on styrofoam.
Oh,
alone.
Geez.
Yeah. Yeah. That was one of my biggest complaints. Like, it's during the pandemic. There's, we have a shortage of caregivers. And I'm like, and yet I do not see a discount for care.
Right.
So you don't get to tell me that you don't have caregivers and charge my client top dollar. That doesn't work for me. But it happened over and over and over again.
Yeah. No, that's troubling to be thinking about. And what is the typical scenario when you get involved with somebody or with a family? How do you normally get involved with that?
So statistically, 1 in 6 Americans over the age of 65 today did not marry or do not have children. 1 in 6 Americans today over the age of 65 are probably working with financial managers or a fiduciary of some sort as they move into their elderly years, or maybe they've lost some cognitive abilities, and they've pursued professional assistance. And I get a lot of referrals from doctors, from fiduciaries, from financial managers, because they recognize that their clients are in decline and they need someone to help them. So, and then we get a lot of family to family referrals. So, and our ideal kind of our avatar client, if you will, is usually a 78-year-old female that, didn't marry and didn't have children. And she's kind of on her own. So, or maybe it's dad and grandma's gone, or it's grandpa and grandma's gone. And, and grandpa's never handled his own medicine. He's never handled any of his care needs, right? He's always had someone looking out for him. So we get a lot of referrals for him too. And he's a little bit older. He's about 86 and oftentimes still independent, but just, has never overseen his own care. So he's kind of doesn't really know how to do that. And a lot of times when it comes to our male clients, they don't want their daughters or their kids to baby them. Like, I don't need my kids taking care of me, right? So they're happy to have a third party professional come in and assist with that. So the men want to retain their independence. The women, just probably need a little companionship in the medical environment or in their housing environment. So, and the women usually stop driving much sooner too. And then my business has actually expanded. We're doing a lot of work now with younger people, that, have complex diseases, and the parents are just emotionally exhausted and they don't know how to navigate the system to get their children the things they need. So we're seeing more and more of that too. We're seeing more grandparents that are taking care of grandkids, and they need some assistance because they're involved in something they've never experienced before. So they want some professional assistance with that. So I personally specialize in cognitive behavior and behavioral health. We have healthcare advocates that specialize in pediatrics all the way to geriatrics, special disease, advanced immunities, and those sorts of things. So
when people engage with you, is it typically for a set issue, or is there kind of an ongoing thing?
So we do. I have what I call a one and done. So we may have someone call and they say, hey, my grandma's getting this money and we're thinking we want a fiduciary, and someone said that you could help with that, right? So I'll give some counsel on what I've done in my experience with fiduciary, and then that's kind of done, right? And I charge a fee for that, $149, depending on how much time we're on the phone. It's $145 an hour. If it's just a quick conversation, we don't charge at all. We have a 30-minute consult that's free. Then we have a little bit more advanced. It's kind of a 3 to 5 hour consulting. So maybe someone's looking at placing mom in assisted living, and they just want another set of eyes and ears in that process. And we don't do placement per se, but we will go and advise the family and show them kind of what to keep an eye out for and what to look for, and kind of thumbs up or thumbs down the environment based on, again, the lens that we're looking through, right? And that usually, we have a flat rate for 3 hours, and it's 3 to 5 hours. It's $499. So that's just a flat rate. In most cases, we write a custom care plan and retainer agreement for most of our clients. And we usually work with our clients for extended periods of time. The longest client I've worked with has been 4 years. And, we're their person, right? I have several people that don't have family, and my organization we have their medical power of attorney. And if they go into crisis, we're called from the hospital and we're sent in to help make decisions on their behalf. And so it just depends. And those retainers run between $95 an hour and $110 an hour, depending on the longevity of the relationship.
Okay. And do you work with people outside of California and Southern Oregon?
No, we actually work. I have a client in New Mexico. I have 2 in Arizona right now. So we work with, we can go pretty much anywhere. We're not bound by state state lines as to where we can go or how we can go. Telemedicine has really opened up the opportunity for us to participate in medical calls and not necessarily have to be present. Although I was just in Arizona this past weekend because I was there for a medical appointment. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And then I've got a question for you too. Now, hopefully I'm a ways off from needing to start thinking about going into a facility or whatnot, but as a grandfather, what can I start to do, or should I start to do, to think about if I do need to transition into someplace, a care facility down the road?
And honestly, I will tell you, things like advanced healthcare directive, every one of us should have one. Everyone should have one. Do you remember years ago that case where the gal was in Florida and she was in a coma and they couldn't get her pulled off of life support and they had to go through all of these court gyrations? It was several years ago, maybe 20 years ago now.
Right.
The healthcare directive was kind of fostered from that case. And every adult should have an advanced healthcare directive that says, and you can Google it, there's templates all over Google that says, if I'm incapacitated or I cannot make medical decisions for myself, here are my wishes, right? And every single one of us, every adult needs to have that. I also believe even with our children at a certain age, we need to have an understanding of what their wishes may be, because unfortunately we're in a society today that wants to make those decisions for our kids. And I think it's really important that we document the kids. And when I say kids, I'm saying 16, 17, 18-year-olds, right? Young adults that should have a voice in how they're cared for if they lose capacity. So advanced healthcare directive, absolutely. Everybody needs one. You also need to have the conversation. I had a dinner and invited my adult children and my family. I was a caregiver for my elderly mother, who was elderly, by the way, and she passed a year ago last week. I had this formal dinner party for my family, and the whole idea behind the dinner party was talk about end of life. And it was a subject that initially everyone was uncomfortable with. And I just said, look, I think it's important that everyone understand each other and what our wishes would be. And there's a way to have those conversations. And hey, I've got to tell you, my own mom, my mother, I cared for my mother for the last 30 years of her life. She lived in my home. And I really, really thought I understood what her wishes were. So I took her and to make her final arrangements. She wanted to take care of all those things herself. My mother had congestive heart failure and upper respiratory disease. So we knew she was a bit on a slippery slope, right? So we go, and I kid you not, everything my mother said she wanted was completely different than I would have thought she was going to say. It was so shocking, right? And it was just like, I can't believe that. It was enlightening for one thing. And we went to lunch after that, and she felt so good about having taken those steps independently and, had made those decisions. Here's another tip for you for this question. You can go in right now and make your funeral arrangements, right? You can make payments on it every month. If you die next week, they don't collect any more money. That it's an insurance policy. That insurance policy pays off. If it takes you 20 years before you're dead and you're still paying on it, it doesn't take on inflation. So you're locking in a price for the cost of whatever your service wishes are. You're locking that price in today through that insurance plan. And, it actually can you can write an annuity and actually earn money out of it that you can transfer to your estate upon death so that your family has an inheritance from it. So there's some cool things there. It's awkward at first, right? And it's, and it makes you a little weepy, but then there just really is this great sense of accomplishment that, I checked that box. And I have to tell you, when my mother passed, every single thing she outlined was done. There were no there wasn't a single thing that I had to consider for her. Yeah. So it was a real gift. It was a gift to me and to my children and to the whole family.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right about that, because it takes, at a very emotional time, it takes the emotion out of it. There's
Mm-hmm.
a playbook in a sense that, somebody's had the ability, when they could have control still, to have that input into it. And just to share a little bit, my awesome daughter-in-law lost her mother, but the mother had that all kind of put in place. Here's the type of flowers. Here's what I want. Here's all these different things. And the kids were able just to essentially open up the binder and run with it. There wasn't any back and forth with, I think mom wanted this. No, you're wrong. Mom wants this. I don't like either decision. Here's what I want. It kind of takes that out. So that's awesome advice.
Yeah. And, it was so, again, it was a gift to the whole family, right? It was so clean and straightforward. And even having a little bit of that journey with my mother, was difficult initially in that day. When I saw how pleased she was with herself, that she had made that accomplishment, right? It made my discomfort completely worth it. And then when she did pass, just like you're describing, right? My mother had a binder. In the binder, there was an envelope. There was 5 $100 bills. She said, I want to take everyone to breakfast. We all went, we all went and had bacon and eggs in her honor, right? And she did it her way, and she did it just the way she wanted to do it. And for me, there was just a lot of peace with that. And there was no debate or arguing or anything like that. She had outlined anything she wanted special for each person. She had outlined what that was, where you would find it. And then the rest of it, she said, do with it as you guys decide you want to do with it, So she really left us with an amazing gift in how she made those decisions. And frankly, I'm remiss in that I have not done it myself. But even talking about it today, it's something that I need to do for my family, because it just really, really was extraordinary.
Renee, I've had you on for a little while. Is there anything about being a healthcare advocate? Is there anything about elder care that we haven't touched upon? We certainly haven't gone over everything, but is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you really want to bring up?
There are a couple of things. One is I want, on my website, there's a free gift that is 5 tips for advocating for yourself or a loved one. And I really, really want to encourage everyone to go into that site and get it. It really sets you up to be successful with your medical providers and to know how to go in and manage those appointments. On average, a medical provider has 11 minutes in the room with you. And listen, I'm as guilty as the next guy of going in there thinking, I'm going to get things a certain way, and then getting in my car after the appointment thinking, we didn't even talk about that, right? So I really encourage everyone to go into those appointments prepared. And I have just a single page document that anyone can get for free off of my website. And it tells you how to advocate for yourself or your loved one and how to be prepared for that. That's number one. Number two, I want to talk a little bit about cognitive impairment, because people are receiving dementia or early stage dementia diagnoses, and dementia is an interesting beast, Greg, in that they don't scan your brain, and they are not looking for lesions, right? The doctors are calling it dementia because of age, and they may even say it's age-related dementia. But one of the things that I wanted to share with you is, after the age of 60, we're more sedentary, unfortunately, and we tend to get urinary tract infections or kidney infections, right? And those can demonstrate through your cognitive ability and your memory. So one of the things that I really, really want your listeners to do is, if someone feels like, gosh, I think my memory's slipping or I'm having a tough time, go have a UA done. Go have a UTI, get checked, because there's a high percentage, and a very high percentage in males over the age of 55, that are being diagnosed with dementia only to discover that it was some kind of kidney problem. So, I don't agree that everything should have an age-related diagnosis attached to it. There's, and again, unfortunately, we've all, experienced that. Well, you're not getting any younger, and things happen, and your body starts to. And it's like, there's some precautionary things that we can do. But most importantly, I think getting the absolute correct diagnosis is really, really important, especially when we're looking at things like cognitive impairment, diagnoses that can really, really spiral a person emotionally. So, if someone thinks I'm, I feel like my memory's not the same, go and give a urine sample and see what your kidneys are doing. So have those wellness checks, get those wellness checks every year for sure.
I think you'd mentioned 5 things, and those were the 2. And I want to make sure that we also talk about, let people know where they can find you on the website and your book and everything.
So the 5 things is for personal healthcare advocacy. 1 is go to the meeting prepared. Always go prepared. Make a list of talking points. Make 2 copies, 1 for you, 1 for the doctor. And don't be shy about giving it to the doctor. I think it's important to respectfully state your needs, exactly what you need. So most doctors are functioning off of a software tool called Epic. And Epic was written by a student at MIT. It's been around for a while. Most large hospital organizations use Epic, and it's EPIC. And Epic, the doctor, if you're wondering what the doctor's doing, they're typing in all of your symptoms in the computer, and then Epic spits out a treatment plan. Now, Epic is a computer. It's not using AI yet. However, all of us are individuals, and all of us are uniquely individual. So I don't want to fall into an Epic treatment plan. And I'll give you a personal example. I was starting to feel some neuropathy in my feet. It was weird, like this tingling in the bottom of my feet. So I go to the doctor, had some blood work done, go to the doctor, and she proceeds to tell me that she thinks it's like my A1C. We're waiting for the blood work to come back, right? And I'm just like, no, I think I'm pretty good. I don't feel diabetic, and I'm careful about what I eat and those sorts of things, right? Well, lo and behold, my blood work all came back fine. There wasn't any issues at all. The long and short of it is I have an issue with my sciatica that's pushing on a nerve that's creating the tingling in my feet. But you want to know who told me about it? Who discovered that? An acupuncturist, not the doctor, because Epic would have never, ever, ever sent me to ortho. It was automatically going to send me, because of my age, into the diabetes spectrum, right? So I tell this story because, again, we know ourselves, we know our body, and I don't want us to be victimized by, the computer systems that they're using in these large institutions, because we are not all the same, and we shouldn't be treated all the same, right? And oh, by the way, the doctor didn't have a treatment for me. Ultimately, she just wanted to give me a nerve blocker. Well, I don't want to take a nerve blocker. And by the way, an addictive nerve blocker at that.
Right.
Like, well, I don't want to take that. I think I'll just do the acupuncture and try to go to the gym and stretch out that sciatica and see if I can get relief off that nerve, right?
Right.
But she didn't talk to me ever about go exercising or walking or stretching or any of the things that we've been told since we were kids that we need to do to take care of these bodies of ours, right? So anyway, the other point on my list here is the more complex the diagnosis, the greater the need for consultation. I do not appreciate sitting in an exam room with a client when they're in gown, when they're being told that they have a critical diagnosis. I want to get dressed, sit in an office, and talk to the doctor about a treatment plan and a care plan. And so as a healthcare advocate, I require that for my clients. I'm all about dignity, and I want to elevate my client's dignity in the room And I want them to be seen as the human beings that they are, not just a member number and fall into some category of treatment. So in my outline here, I talk about that, like how to elevate yourself or your loved one and say, doctor, I'd like to get dressed and come and sit down in your office and talk about this further. Because first of all, you need a break. Second of all, you're very vulnerable in that exam room in the paper gown. And it just shouldn't be that way as a human being. So the other point I make here is learn the business of care. There's a legal term called unsafe discharge. If someone's in a hospital, let's say you end up falling and you go in and you end up having to have knee replacement therapy, right? Or knee replacement. So they do this operation, they replace your knee, and then they want to send you to a skilled setting for physical therapy. The fact is your insurance company will pay for the physical therapist to come to your home. I think it's a better setting because it's a healthier setting than putting you in a skilled environment where there's all kinds of sick people, right? You can be discharged home with a home health nurse and a physical therapist and an occupational therapist. And your insurance will pay 100% of that. And most people don't know that, so they don't ask. They just assume that they have to go to a skilled setting. And that may be okay for you, for some people, but I don't think it's the optimum environment for recovery. So the other thing is, from the skilled setting, Medicare only pays for 100 calendar days of care a year. If you have a debilitating illness or, you've fallen and you're in a skilled setting for 100 days, then they decide and it's very quick. Suddenly they're sending you home because insurance isn't paying for it anymore. So now you're sending, my 92-year-old grandma home without additional care. She's no longer eligible for in-home nursing. She's no longer eligible for physical therapy at home because we exhausted those monies at the skilled setting. So there is a legal term called unsafe discharge, which requires the hospital or the care setting to hold your loved one until we can establish an environment for care. And again, there's in my website, there's a whole outline of these kinds of conversations and in ways to help people be able to leverage their knowledge about the care environment so that they can benefit best from it. And then the last note here that I make is bring a companion, bring someone else to talk for you. I'm always very, very respectful of my client in an appointment. The appointment is about them. Prior to the appointment, we talk about the conversations that my clients may want to have. I will always sit back and let the client lead the conversation until the client invites me into the conversation, or if I feel like the client's overlooking some things. So, and even with my mother, at my mother's end of life, I took her to the ER and we were on our way and she said to me, do you think I'm dying? And I said, Mom, do you think you're dying? And she said, I think I am. And I said, okay, what do you want to do? How do you want to do this? Because, I can have a hospital room set up in my house inside of 2 hours with all the care supports that you need. And she said, no, I think I want to just stay at the hospital. I think I'm good. And I do not want any heroic measures. And I said, okay, so what do you mean by that? So in the car, we're driving and we're talking about all these details, right? We get to the hospital, they rally. There's 20 people in the room with her. The cardiac specialist comes over to me and he was talking to me about her end of life. And I said, doctor, my mother's completely lucid and she can answer all of your questions directly. And he said, really? And I said, yes. And so we approached her bed. She answered every single one of his questions just the same way she'd answered them in the car with me. And I was confident that she was completely in control. Now, what happens if someone's not, right? If someone doesn't know how to articulate that, then you go back to that advanced healthcare directive and we have those documents that says, nope, I had these conversations with my mother and here are her wishes. We know what her wishes were. And then we act on those. And again, these aren't easy conversations. They're difficult to have. It wasn't easy to stand there and observe it with my mother, but when it was said and done, Greg, I knew I had done everything the way she wanted it done. And there was tremendous peace with that, tremendous peace. Mm-hmm. So yeah. And I just recommend for all of your audience, like, get acquainted. Don't be afraid. Everyone's going to die. We're all going to do it. Right. And it shouldn't, we were in the United States. It's not a conversation that we have grown comfortable with having here. Like, it's something, even my mom's finances, right? Like, I didn't know about my mom's money. It wasn't ever anything that I needed to know about. Right. But, she had outlined everything and had left me a document, and everything about that was all cared for. But, I understand how hard it is to have these conversations, and we just have to do it because it's the right thing to do. And we don't want to neglect that.
Oh, sure. Renee, how can people best get a hold of you and, one, get this great document, but then also I think you've got a podcast coming out yourself, and there's some books and some things. So I want to make sure people know where they can go to get more information from you.
Thank you. My website is Renee Company, RENEE Company, COMPANY.com. Everything is there. I have a whole media section, so all of my media is there, my books, my podcasts. I do have a radio show that's coming out in Voice of America. I'm so excited about that. I just signed contracts with them, and they really feel like this is a subject that more and more listeners need to hear about, and we need to have more education about it. So I'm excited about that. We'll probably start broadcasting that live in October. So we've got some work to do to get it all ready, but yeah, they're running a 13-week pilot on me. So, fingers crossed, that'll become very popular. Again, we do 30-minute free consults all the time. I don't want anyone to hesitate. If they have a question, reach out and call me. My phone number, my direct number is 541-661-2369. And then our service, all of our phone numbers and everything's on the website too. So all of that can come through the website. So I'm happy to answer any questions that I can for anyone.
That's awesome. And I know folks might be driving around or walking the dog or whatnot. So we'll put links for all of this into the show notes as well to make it easy. So if they happen to forget the website, they can get it off the show notes. But
Great. I get to have any guests I want on my radio show, Greg. So I think we have to reciprocate, and you have to come on and talk about being a cool grandpa.
I'd love to do that.
And, I think for most of us, we want to leave a legacy for our family, right? That's what makes, I have a little grandson who's 14 months old, and it seems the only word he knows right now is Papa. And so I get these FaceTime calls, and I answer, and he's like, Papa, Papa, Papa. And then he sees his Papa and just beams. Like, he gets so excited and kind of shy because he wants to show him stuff, right? And so, watching my husband respond to this baby and this baby respond to him, I mean, that's our real legacy, right? We really want to honor our families. We want to honor our kids and their kids and their kids, right? And these are hard conversations to have, but if we do it well, I promise we're leaving a great legacy.
I couldn't agree more. And to the awesome example that you shared about your mom, we can still have control over some of the wishes that we have for our future care, and then also the end of life discussions as well. I think that's all part of, leading our families and being proactive in our lives versus reactive.
Yeah. In the last hours of my mother's life, we were all there together. We were gathered with her. And again, there was a sense of peace over the whole room, because they knew everything was tucked in, right? Everything I could do as a healthcare advocate had been done. Originally, the hospital, because we were just at the tail end of COVID rules, right? And originally the hospital said, well, she can only have one visitor. And I said, no. Federal law says if she's at end of life, we can have as many visitors as she wants. And this poor little security person, right? She just kind of looked at me, and I had it on my phone. I came prepared. Here's what the federal law says. So she said, can you give me a moment, please? And I'm like, of course. She comes back with her clipboard and she said, who might we be expecting?
Oh.
Yep. And the whole family was there with her. And we just had again, there was a piece about the fact that everything had been done. There was no turmoil or angst. There was certainly sadness because she was very loved. But, there was a peace in knowing that everything went her way, just the way she wanted it. So, and that's the best we can do, right?
Absolutely. Renee, thank you so much for being on the Cool Grandpa podcast. I've really enjoyed this very important and informative conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I hope to see you again talk to you again. And I'm going to have you on my show. And it's called the See Differently Project, because we're going to start changing the way people view care.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.
Bye. I sure did appreciate Renee coming on the show and talking to us about all the different ins and outs of senior planning and senior care. So many different things that we take for granted, that we just assume that everybody's got our best interest at heart, which oftentimes they do. It's just maybe the execution isn't as great as it could be. I also enjoyed learning a little bit more about that program EPIC and about how that is used to sometimes default a doctor or a caregiver's decision making into whatever the computer kind of comes back out for a course of action. I thought it was great being able to talk about this white coat syndrome and that we need somebody to step back to be able to think about things critically and really determine the best course of care and the best planning for us, right? None of us want to make a bad choice, and none of us want to be regretting a choice that we made. Even if the outcome turns out to be okay, maybe there was a different way to get there that somebody else could maybe have advised us about. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Renee. Please go to her website, reneecompany.com. Please check out some of the information that she has there. It's really helpful. It's really useful. And please be sure to share this conversation with friends and family that would enjoy and could benefit from listening to Renee's wisdom. So until next time, remember to stay cool. Thank you for listening to the Cool Grandpa podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and share it with a friend. That's the best way you can help us to expand our community, as well as get the news out about how valuable grandpas are in the lives of those kids. If you'd like to leave me a comment or shoot me a potential topic for this podcast, please go to www.cool-grandpa.us. Look for the comments tab, fill it out, hit submit. It's as easy as that. Until next time, remember to stay cool.